If you've ever had a dream so vivid, so chilling, that it felt like more than just a dream, this story is going to hit you hard. Because what if the dreams weren't just dreams at all? What if the strange visions that woke you up night after night were actually a warning, or worse, a real memory trying to crawl back into your mind? What would you do if your child came to you and described a place they had never been, with terrifying precision, and then that place turned out to be real? This isn't just a creepy story. It's a journey into a world where the line between imagination and reality fades, and what's left behind will change a family forever. And trust me, by the time you reach the end of this story, the question that brought you here, the one twisting in the back of your mind, you're going to get your answer. But it's how we get there that's going to shake you. So, take a breath. You're going to need it. Now, before we jump in, I want to talk to you not just as a storyteller, but as a fellow human being who's seen how powerful the mind can be. Maybe you've had moments that didn't make sense. Maybe you've felt that eerie pull toward something you couldn't explain. We all have those questions we don't really ask out loud, because we're afraid of what the answer might be. But this is where one of those questions gets answered. So stay with me, not just because it's about to get intense, but because if you click away now, you might miss the one clue that ties everything together. This story doesn't hand you everything at once. It makes you earn the truth, and once you find it, you'll never see dreams the same way again. Okay, so here's how it all begins. It starts like most stories do, not with something huge and obvious, but with something small. A strange moment. A weird detail that most people would dismiss. Except it doesn't go away. A 14-year-old kid named Josh, living in the quiet suburbs of Northern Oregon, starts having the same dream. Not just once or twice, but every single night for 3 weeks straight. In it, he's walking down a long, dark tunnel. Not a normal tunnel either, this one is made of damp stone, with walls so narrow he can barely breathe. It feels cold, like the kind of cold that sinks into your bones. The air smells like wet earth and rusted metal, and there's this constant, low-humming noise that gets louder the deeper he walks. But here's the weird part, it's always exactly the same. Same tunnel. Same turns. Same end point, a door that won't open. At first, Josh doesn't think much of it. Kids have nightmares, right? But after a few nights, he starts writing them down. Drawing the tunnel. Mapping it out. Every curve, every crack, every corner. His parents, Lisa and Greg, think it's just his imagination. Maybe he's stressed from school, maybe he's been watching too many creepy TikToks or YouTube videos about underground bunkers or secret passages, stuff that's all over trending feeds right now. But Josh insists he's not making it up. He says he can feel it. Like the tunnel is real, and he's been there before. Now, as a parent, think about that. You love your kid, you want to protect them, but what do you do when they come to you with something that sounds insane? Lisa tries to comfort him, tells him it's just anxiety, gives him melatonin to help him sleep. But nothing works. And then things start to get even weirder. Josh begins drawing parts of the tunnel he couldn't have seen in his dream, new angles, strange markings on the walls, symbols he doesn't recognize. He's losing weight. Barely sleeping. Talking less. And every night, he wakes up at exactly 2:46 a.m., screaming. That's when Lisa starts to take it seriously. She digs through old photo albums, searches for clues in their house history, even installs a motion sensor camera in his room, just in case something else is going on. Greg thinks it's all just puberty and too much screen time, but Lisa can feel it in her gut, something is wrong. And then, one night, Josh disappears. Not for long. Just for an hour. But when they find him, he's in the woods behind their house, barefoot, shivering, covered in mud. He doesn't remember how he got there. All he says is, the door opened. Now this is where things start to go from weird to disturbing. Because what Josh described next, when Lisa finally gets him calm enough to talk, isn't just a dream. He talks about specific locations, buried objects, even a small metal hatch hidden under a fallen tree stump about 2 miles from their property. Greg finally gives in and agrees to check it out with a flashlight and a crowbar. And here's the moment, this is where the chills start crawling up your spine, because they find it. Exactly where Josh said. The metal hatch. Rusted shut, half buried in roots. It's real. This wasn't just a dream. This wasn't just imagination. This was a memory. A suppressed experience that somehow clawed its way back into Josh's consciousness, night after night, until he couldn't ignore it anymore. And the worst part? Josh has never been to that part of the woods. Not once. Not in his memory. Not in his life. But his feet, his instincts, they knew exactly where to go. At this point, Lisa wants to call the police, but Greg's more cautious. What if it's just an old storm drain or a leftover bunker from the Cold War? They decide to keep it quiet, just between them. But when they finally pry the hatch open and look inside, they realize they're not just uncovering a tunnel. They're uncovering a secret that someone buried on purpose. A secret someone didn't want them to find. And here's where I need you to really lean in, because what's inside that tunnel? That's where this story takes a turn that nobody saw coming. Something is waiting down there. Something tied to Josh's past, and maybe even to theirs. This is no longer about dreams. It's about truth. About memory. About how deep the human mind can bury trauma and how hard it fights to bring it back up when the time is right. If you've made it this far, I know you're not just here for a creepy story. You want to understand what happened. Why it happened. And what it means. Because every now and then, a story comes along that doesn't just entertain you, it stays with you. It makes you question everything you thought you knew about the world. About memory. About how far a parent will go to protect their child, even from something they don't fully understand. So stay with me, because we're just getting started. What Josh and his family find inside that tunnel. It's bigger than any of them imagined. And before this story ends, you're going to see how far the past can reach, when it refuses to stay buried. Because sometimes, the truth doesn't knock. It crawls out of the dark, and drags you back in. The days leading up to the first dream had been unremarkable, at least on the surface. Josh wasn't the kind of teenager who stirred up trouble. He wasn't wildly popular, but he wasn't isolated either. He had a small, tight group of friends, kids who played video games after school, rode their bikes down to the gas station for energy drinks and junk food, and occasionally snuck into the old abandoned sawmill at the edge of town just for the adrenaline rush. Nothing about him screamed troubled. He was solid. Curious, but grounded. So when the dream started, it was easy for his parents to dismiss it as stress from school. Still, they couldn't ignore it. The old VCR was still in the basement, tucked away under stacks of forgotten family DVDs and dusty board games. Greg set it up in the living room while Lisa kept an eye on Josh, who sat on the couch rigid, barely blinking. The second the tape started, the room fell dead silent. It was static at first. Hissing white noise, the kind that makes your skin crawl even though there's nothing happening. Then it cut to black. For a few seconds, nothing. Just darkness. Then a faint flicker of light, a flickering flashlight beam, jittery and unstable. Someone was filming. The screen showed a tight space, almost claustrophobic. Stone walls. Damp floor. A narrow tunnel. The exact one Josh had been dreaming about. There was no audio except the harsh breathing of the person holding the camera. They moved slowly, stopping every few seconds to shine the light on strange markings on the wall. The same symbols Josh had been drawing for weeks. The person filming reached a metal door. Scratched. Dented. Identical to the one in Josh's dreams. And then the footage froze. The image warped. And just before the tape ended, a distorted voice whispered something barely audible but clear enough to make Josh jerk upright and clutch his head in pain. He started crying. And not just out of fear. Out of memory. He said he'd heard that voice before. That he'd heard it the night in the woods when he blacked out. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was that when Greg tried to rewind the tape to replay it, it was blank. Just static. No footage. Gone. They rewound it over and over, nothing. It was like the tape had erased itself after they'd watched it. Greg even tried to record the screen with his phone while they were watching, but the video wouldn't play back. It was corrupted. All of it. Like whatever they had seen was never meant to be captured. That was the moment Lisa realized something was watching them too. Because no ordinary tape behaves like that. No ordinary message erases itself. From that point on, things escalated quickly. MIA started getting sick. Not in a flu or cold kind of way, but sick in her sleep. Her mom called Lisa in a panic after she found her daughter sleepwalking outside in the middle of the night, standing barefoot in the rain, facing the woods. She was muttering something about a tunnel. About the others. When Lisa tried to visit her the next day, MIA didn't come to the door. Her mother said she wasn't seeing visitors anymore. And when Lisa pressed her for more, her tone changed. She told Lisa to stop digging into things that were better left alone. Then she closed the door without another word. It wasn't just MIA. Ethan had disappeared. Completely. His parents said he ran away, but there were no signs of him packing, no signs of struggle. Just an open window and a single word written in chalk on the wall above his bed, beneath. The police wrote it off as a troubled kid skipping town. But Lisa knew better. Because the very next day, that same word appeared on the side of their house, written in the same style, in the same chalk, just below Josh's bedroom window. That was the first time Greg stopped trying to play the rational card. They both knew now, this wasn't coincidence. This was targeted. Someone, or something, was trying to scare them. Or warn them. That night, Josh had another episode. He woke up screaming, clawing at the wall behind his bed. When they pulled him away, they realized he wasn't dreaming, he was trying to dig. His fingernails were cracked and bleeding, the drywall torn open. Behind it, a small, square compartment that none of them had ever seen before. It looked like part of the original house had been sealed off. Inside was a rusted lockbox. They opened it the next morning. What they found inside changed everything. It was a stack of photos. Old, faded, most of them black and white. But not just random photos, they were of the land behind their house. Before the trees grew in. Before the neighborhood even existed. One photo showed a fenced-off area with a large warning sign, restricted access, federal property, trespassers will be prosecuted. Another showed a man standing in front of what looked like a concrete hatch, almost identical to the one Josh had found. But the most chilling photo was the last one. A group shot 4 children, standing beside that hatch, smiling awkwardly for the camera. Josh was in the photo. Except the photo was dated 1993. Josh wasn't even born until 2009. Lisa felt the blood drain from her face. She turned the photo over. A name was scribbled faintly in pencil, Project Echo, Group 3 survivors. This wasn't just a dream. This wasn't just trauma. This was a buried past. A secret someone had erased, except not completely. Josh was never supposed to remember. But now that he had, others were starting to notice. Later that week, a man showed up at Greg's work. Dressed in a black coat, clean-shaven, polite but firm. Said he was from a historical preservation firm. Said they were surveying land around the area and wanted access to their property to update records. He left a card. No phone number. Just a logo, a circle with 3 lines crossing through it. Greg Googled the firm. It didn't exist. At least, not online. No website. No LinkedIn page. Just silence. That night, Greg found their mailbox ripped open. All their letters gone. And then something even more strange happened. Josh stopped remembering his dreams. At first, they thought it was over. That the worst had passed. But Josh didn't seem relieved, he seemed hollow. Detached. Like something had been taken from him. Lisa begged him to talk, but he just stared past her, almost like he was listening to something no one else could hear. Then, without warning, he handed her one of his notebooks. The one filled with the tunnel drawings. He told her to burn it. Said it was listening through the pages. Lisa refused. But later that night, the notebook disappeared from her nightstand. The next morning, the same symbol that had been on the man's business card, the circle with 3 intersecting lines, was drawn in soot on their living room mirror. Lisa didn't sleep that night. Neither did Greg. They took shifts watching Josh, waiting for anything strange. Nothing happened. But at exactly 2:46 a.m., the power in the house went out. Phones died. Flashlights flickered. And then, from the baby monitor they hadn't used in years but somehow had turned itself on, a voice whispered. He was never supposed to leave. And just like that, It cut off. But what that voice meant, or who it belonged to, is something no one in the house could explain. Because the next morning, when they checked the hidden hatch in the woods, it was open. And what they found inside wasn't a tunnel. It was a room. The discovery of the second photograph shattered whatever thin illusion of control Josh and his parents had been clinging to. Up until that moment, there was still a sliver of possibility that everything was just a coincidence, some tangled mix of stress, adolescent imagination, and urban legend spiraling out of control. But that photo was undeniable. It showed Josh standing in the same narrow tunnel from his dreams, only older, maybe 17 or 18, with darker hair, a thinner face, and eyes that seemed hollow. He was wearing a heavy black coat, military-style boots, and gloves. But it wasn't just the outfit that was disturbing, it was the posture, the stance. The way he stood beside the second figure in the image, shoulder to shoulder, like an ally. But that other person, the resemblance was uncanny. Not identical, but impossibly close. Same jawline, same eyes, only colder. The figure had the same scar Josh now had on his left wrist, one he didn't even remember getting until after he returned from the woods. Lisa's hands trembled as she held the photo. She wanted to believe it was doctored, a cruel trick, a deepfake maybe, even though it was a physical print. But in her gut, she knew better. The details were too exact. The photo had age to it, where along the corners, dust embedded in the fibers. It wasn't new. It wasn't staged. And the background matched everything Josh had described in his dreams, right down to the rusted pipe overhead and the strange pattern of cracks in the tunnel wall. But the most disturbing thing of all was what was written on the back of the photo in the same faded pencil as the others. Phase 2 activated, subject returned, timeline unknown. The air in the room shifted that moment. It was like time slowed, or thickened, or warped. Josh's breathing grew rapid, shallow, and he stumbled back from the table, almost as if the photo had physically repelled him. He muttered something under his breath, words that didn't quite make sense, pieces of phrases, fragments of thoughts. Not supposed to be here. They said it was sealed. It was sealed. Lisa grabbed him, pulled him into her arms, but he barely seemed to register it. His pupils were dilated, his skin clammy. It was as if touching the photograph had triggered something buried deep inside him, something dormant for years, maybe since birth. He started to panic, screaming that it was awake now, that the tunnel wasn't a place but a trap, a kind of loop designed to test people over and over again until they forgot who they were. Lisa tried to calm him, to pull him back to reality, but in that moment, Josh didn't know what was real anymore. And truthfully, neither did she. The next morning, Josh wasn't in his bed. The window was locked from the inside, the door shut. But he was gone. No note. No sign of forced entry. Just his phone, sitting on the desk, playing static. Lisa and Greg tore the house apart. Called everyone. Police. Friends. Neighbors. MIA. No one had seen or heard from him. They filed a report, just like they had done when Ethan vanished. But this time, it felt different. Lisa didn't believe Josh had run. She believed he'd been taken. And then, 3 days later, he came back. He walked in through the front door like nothing had happened. Except he was barefoot. Covered in dirt. His lips were cracked. He didn't speak. Just went straight to his room and lay down. Lisa sobbed with relief, hugging him, touching his face, but Josh just stared past her. When Greg asked where he had been, he finally spoke, just 2 words. They know. That night, he refused to sleep. Kept all the lights on in his room. Drew symbols on the floor with chalk Lisa didn't even know they had. When she asked him who they were, he shook his head slowly and whispered, "They're the ones who made the choice. I was just born into it." Lisa had no idea what that meant. But every time she pushed for answers, he'd retreat into silence. The only thing he asked was if she still had the second photograph. When she went to get it, it was gone. Not just misplaced. Missing. Vanished from the drawer she had locked it in. And this wasn't the first time. The original notebook, the VHS tape, now the photo, everything that proved what was happening was being erased. As if someone was cleaning up behind them, trying to scrub out the truth before it could be fully seen. The fear began to consume Lisa. Not just for Josh's safety, but for her own sanity. She started seeing patterns in everything, numbers repeating, static on the radio at odd times, lights flickering in the same room at exactly 2:46 a.m. She knew how that sounded. Knew she was on the edge of believing something she couldn't even define. But how do you ignore evidence that keeps disappearing? How do you protect your child from something that doesn't leave fingerprints? The final straw came 2 nights later. Lisa woke up to the sound of whispering in the hallway. She followed it, barefoot, heart racing. The sound led her to Josh's room, but the door was wide open and the bed was empty. On the wall above the bed, smeared in black ash, was a message. "Don't follow me. This time, I chose it." The back door was open. Josh was gone again. But this time, he didn't return the next day. Or the next. And the morning after that, someone slipped an envelope under the front door. Inside was a grainy, black and white photo of Lisa and Greg, taken from outside their bedroom window. And underneath it, scrawled in thick red ink. "He was the first. You're next." Now, Lisa knew this wasn't just about her son. It wasn't just about the past. It was about something far older, something they had been pulled into without ever realizing. Whatever Project Echo was, it hadn't ended. And somewhere out there, in the woods, behind that rusted hatch, someone was watching, waiting, erasing the evidence, and planning what would happen next. Let me know when you want to continue the next section, where the true origins of the tunnel, the experiments, and Josh's identity start to unravel in a way no one saw coming. Lisa didn't sleep after the photo arrived. She sat at the kitchen table with every light on in the house, staring at the grainy image of herself and Greg, taken from an angle that meant someone had been just feet away from their bedroom, hidden in the dark. She ran every possibility through her head: a stalker, a twisted prank, someone watching their every move. But no theory explained the message written beneath it. Not just the threat, but the wording. He was the first. First of what? Of who? And what did your next actually mean? It didn't feel random anymore. It felt orchestrated. Deliberate. Like every event, the dreams, the tunnel, the photographs had been steps in a much larger game. And they had just been playing their roles, blind to the rules until it was too late to stop. She tried calling the police again, this time demanding more than a missing persons report. She begged them to trace the envelope, check surveillance cameras, anything. But there was nothing to go on. No fingerprints. No cameras pointed in the right direction. It was as if the person or people watching them knew every blind spot. That same day, Greg went into town to follow a lead from a retired land surveyor he'd spoken to weeks ago about the odd gaps in their property's ownership history. The man had promised to look through his personal records, said he'd get back to them when he found something useful. But Greg never came home. His car was found parked outside a small convenience store on the edge of town. Keys still in the ignition. His phone in the passenger seat. But no trace of him. Lisa collapsed. For the first time since this nightmare began, she let herself unravel. She screamed until her throat burned. Cried until her chest hurt. And when she finally picked up Greg's phone and tried to call his most recent contact, something strange happened. The screen flickered. Then shut off. Dead battery. Except it had been fully charged just that morning. She plugged it in. Nothing. Like the device itself had been bricked from the inside. She stared at it, shaking, remembering how the VHS tape erased itself, how the notebook vanished, how the photos disappeared. Someone, or something, wasn't just watching. They were controlling the narrative. Deciding what stayed and what vanished. Later that night, just after midnight, the doorbell rang. She froze. It was too late for anyone to be dropping by. And whoever it was hadn't called, hadn't texted. The security camera on the porch, installed just days earlier, was black. No feed. Heart pounding, she stepped toward the door, hand gripping a kitchen knife she hadn't realized she picked up. When she opened it, there was no one there. Just a figure walking away slowly toward the street. Tall. Dressed in a heavy black coat. She almost called out, but then the figure stopped, turned halfway toward her, and even from the distance, she saw his face clearly. It was Josh. She ran after him, barefoot across the lawn, calling his name over and over. But he didn't slow. Didn't look back. And when she reached the road, he was gone. No sign. No footsteps. Just a faint humming in the air, the same low-frequency sound Josh had described from his dreams. She turned to go back inside, only to find someone standing at the edge of the woods. It was MIA. Only it wasn't the MIA Lisa remembered. Her face was pale, lips chapped, and her eyes didn't have the warmth they once did. She looked like she hadn't slept in days. Or maybe weeks. She stepped forward slowly and said one thing, soft, calm, terrifying in its certainty. You were never supposed to be part of this. Lisa stared, stunned. Where's Josh? Where's Greg? What's happening? But MIA only shook her head and said something that shattered the last remaining belief Lisa had in the world she thought she understood. You're not his real mother. The air drained from Lisa's lungs. She staggered back, confused, angry, panicked. What are you talking about? MIA stepped closer. You've always thought this started with him. The dreams. The tunnel. But it started long before Josh was born. They chose you. Not him. You were the variable. He was just the carrier. Lisa couldn't breathe. It felt like her chest was caving in. What do you mean, chosen? MIA didn't answer. Instead, she reached into her coat and pulled out a small, old-looking photo. Lisa took it with shaking hands. It was another group shot. Government style, black and white, clearly decades old. 5 women standing in a line in front of a military building, eyes hollow, smiles forced. And in the center, looking exactly like she did now, was Lisa. Same face. Same hair. Same scar above the eyebrow. But this photo was dated 1984. Her entire body went cold. This is impossible, she whispered. But MIA just turned, walking back into the trees. You're not who you think you are. None of us are. And the tunnel isn't a place. It's a reset point. Then she vanished into the woods. Lisa stood there, frozen under the empty night sky, holding a photo that couldn't exist, staring at a truth she had no way to process. Her son was gone. Her husband was missing. And now, everything she knew about her own life, her identity, her past, was falling apart. And from deep within the woods, she heard it again. That low, humming sound. Growing louder. And this time, it was calling her name. Would you like to continue with the final act twist, where Lisa uncovers what Project Echo really is and the chilling purpose behind the tunnels, the dreams, and her entire reality? Lisa didn't go back inside that night. She couldn't. Not after what MIA said, not with that photo still clutched in her shaking hand. She sat on the front porch until the sky began to lighten, watching shadows shift through the trees and half expecting Josh or someone wearing his face to step out of the dark again. Her thoughts were tangled, spinning out in too many directions at once, none of them making sense. If the photo was real, if that was her in 1984, then everything she believed about her life, her childhood, her memories, her family was a fabrication. And if that was true, then what else had been planted in her mind? What else was a lie? Her hands trembled as she looked again at the old image. It wasn't just a resemblance. It was her. The curve of her jaw, the small scar she got falling off her bike at age 9, or had she? She couldn't trust that memory anymore. Couldn't trust anything. And that realization hit harder than the loss of Josh or Greg or even her own identity. Because now, even her emotions felt suspect. Was her love for her family real? Or programmed? Could feelings be implanted just like false memories? By the time the sun was up, she had made a decision. She had to confront someone, anyone, who might have answers. And the only person left was MIA. If she had access to those photographs, if she knew things Lisa didn't, then she was part of this on a level deeper than she'd let on. Lisa didn't know whether to trust her or fear her. But either way, she needed the truth. She drove straight to Mia's house without even changing clothes. But when she got there, the front yard was empty. The curtains were drawn. The windows were black. She rang the bell. Knocked. No answer. Just as she was about to leave, a voice came from behind her. She's not here. They took her too. Lisa turned. The neighbor, Mr. Halvorsen, an older man who always seemed to be trimming his hedges no matter the season, stood at the edge of his yard, eyes narrowed. "You should go home, Lisa," he said, his tone even but laced with warning. "You're in deep now. They don't let people out once they start seeing behind the curtain." Lisa walked toward him slowly. "You know something," she said. "You've been watching this whole time, haven't you?" Halvorsen hesitated, then nodded. "I've been watching for years. Since before you even moved in. That house, it's one of the sights. Didn't you ever wonder why it was so cheap? Why nobody else ever stayed long?" Lisa's stomach turned. "What do you mean, one of the sights?" "It's a control point," he said quietly. "Every few decades, they reset it. Move in a new family, reassign roles, wipe whatever history needs wiping. Your husband. Not his real name. Your son. Engineered for Phase 2. You were supposed to be a limiter." Lisa couldn't breathe. "A what?" "A counterbalance. A stabilizer. Someone to keep him from triggering too soon. But something failed. The dreams came too early. Maybe the programming broke down. Maybe the emotional imprint didn't take. Or maybe," he trailed off, looking at her now not with contempt, but something closer to pity. "Maybe you remembered too much." Lisa stepped back. Her knees felt weak. "Why are you telling me this now?" "Because they gave me a choice. Help maintain the illusion or disappear. And I made mine." He turned to walk away, then paused. "You don't have much time left. Once Phase 3 begins, you'll have to choose too." "Choose what?" she called after him. "What does that mean?" But he didn't answer. Back at home, Lisa found the front door ajar. She froze in the doorway, listening. The house was still. Too still. She walked through each room, expecting anything, but found nothing moved. Until she reached the kitchen. On the table, where she'd left the photo from 1984, sat a new one. A fresh Polaroid. Still slightly curled at the corners. It showed Josh again, but not from before. This time, he was sitting at the base of a concrete wall, hands bound, a look of absolute defeat in his eyes. Behind him was the tunnel. The real one. There was a timestamp in the corner. That morning's date. Just hours ago. Beneath the photo, written in sharp red marker. "You can have him back. But only if you trade." Lisa sank into the chair, shaking all over. A trade. A choice. That's what Halvorsen meant. The ultimatum was clear: if she wanted her son back, she'd have to give something up. But what? Her freedom? Her memories? Her own identity? Or something worse? She didn't know who had sent the photo. Didn't know where the tunnel really led, or how deep this experiment went. But she knew this wasn't about just rescuing Josh anymore. It was about uncovering the truth. And the truth came at a cost. One she might not be ready to pay. That night, Lisa found a flash drive taped to the underside of the mailbox. No note. No envelope. Just the drive. Inside were dozens of files, medical records, video surveillance, field reports, all labeled with her name and Josh's. And one final file, a video. It began with static. Then a view of her holding infant Josh in a sterile hospital room she didn't recognize. A man off camera spoke. "Subject 17 has bonded well. Emotional attachment is stable. Limiter integration successful." Then the voice added something that made Lisa's blood run cold. "Begin Phase 3 at maternal trigger point. If Subject 17 refuses recalibration, reassign the limiter. Wipe if necessary." The screen went black. Lisa had no plan. Only instinct. She packed a flashlight, the flash drive, a bottle of water, and whatever adrenaline her body could scrape together, and drove back to the hatch in the woods, the one Josh had found, the one that should have never reopened. Everything in her body screamed against it, but she didn't care anymore. Not after seeing the photo. Not after that file. If they wanted her to make a trade, they were going to have to do it face to face. The forest was darker than usual, as if the trees were leaning in, and the air felt heavier with every step she took. She moved fast, brushing past branches and ducking under hanging limbs until the clearing opened up ahead of her. And there it was. The hatch. Unlocked. Open. Waiting. She climbed down the rusted ladder into the darkness, flashlight flickering in her grip, the metal cold against her palms. The tunnel was just like Josh had described, narrow, damp, walls lined with crumbling stone and faint markings that glowed in the beam of her light. The air had a hum to it, low and vibrating through her bones, and the deeper she went, the more disoriented she became. Her watch froze. Her phone lost time. The tunnel didn't follow the rules of the world above, it twisted, warped, turned without logic. She marked the walls with chalk as she passed, terrified she'd lose her way. But then she heard voices. Faint. Familiar. She followed them, heart racing, until she found a doorway ahead, half-cracked, rusted at the hinges. Inside, a long corridor glowed with dim fluorescent lights, leading to a larger chamber where figures moved in silence, clipboards in hand, coats sterile white, faces blank. It was a facility. Still operational. Still alive. She stepped into the light and ducked behind a crate, her breath catching in her throat as one of the figures passed close by, and she recognized them. Her sister. Emily. Lisa blinked, not trusting her own eyes. Emily had died in a car crash 8 years ago. At least, that's what she'd been told. But there she was, alive, older, wearing the same white coat as the others, holding a data tablet, moving with confidence and purpose. Lisa stepped out without thinking, heart slamming in her chest. Emily. Her sister froze, turned slowly, eyes wide. And for a moment, something almost human flickered in her expression. Then it disappeared. You weren't supposed to come here. Lisa couldn't process it. You're alive. Why didn't you tell me? Where's Josh? What is this place? Emily didn't answer. Instead, she stepped forward with calm authority and reached for a device clipped to her belt. Lisa backed away. Don't, she warned. You don't understand, Lisa, Emily said. You were never supposed to remember. You were a containment variable. A failsafe. You lied to me. Everyone lied to me. Because you chose this, Emily said flatly. You signed the protocol. What protocol? But Emily was already moving, signaling to someone behind her. More figures appeared, blocking exits. You and Josh were part of the same study, different phases, different roles. You volunteered after the incident with Mom. You said if there was a way to rewrite trauma, to overwrite it before it took root, you'd be the first in line. Lisa staggered back, mind unraveling. She had no memory of any of that. No memory of volunteering. Of agreeing to anything. I never. You did. We wiped it after. You said that was the only way it would work. And it did. Until he started remembering ahead of schedule. Until you started questioning the dreams. Lisa's voice cracked. What did you do to him? Emily's eyes flickered. He was the control. A carrier for the data. He was never meant to reach adolescence with the memories still intact. That's why the recalibration failed. That's why he ran. That's why Greg, she hesitated. Just for a second. Lisa caught it. What about Greg? Emily didn't speak. No, what did you do to him? He was never part of the experiment. He wasn't supposed to be here this long. He got too close. Lisa felt like the floor had dropped out from under her. Her husband wasn't missing. He'd been removed. You killed him, she whispered. You erased him like everything else. No, Emily said. We archived him. Lisa felt sick. What does that mean? He's not dead. But he's not here either. Lisa could barely stand. Her body was shaking all over, her mind a blur of fury and disbelief. Where's Josh? Emily sighed. He's in the core sector. He asked for you. You're going to let me see him? Emily's face softened, just slightly. That's the trade. Lisa didn't trust her. Not for a second. But she had no other choice. They led her through a maze of corridors, past observation rooms, sealed chambers, one filled with dozens of monitors showing people, families, children living lives in what looked like perfect suburban neighborhoods. But none of them were real. They were simulations. Test environments. Control loops. And in one of them, she saw herself. Living a life that wasn't hers. Raising a child that wasn't Josh. With a man that wasn't Greg. A version of her that had no idea what was real or what wasn't. They call it echo living, Emily explained. Each version slightly different, designed to test resilience. Emotional elasticity. Trauma tolerance. Lisa stared, horrified. You've been doing this to people? No. Not people, Emily corrected. Just you. Over and over again. You've been the variable in every loop. Lisa turned to her. Why? Emily didn't blink. Because you always fight back. Every time. And that's what they're trying to understand. What makes someone reject false reality? What makes someone remember? Lisa had no words. She was numb. When they finally opened the door to the core sector, she expected a lab, a prison, something clinical. But it was a bedroom. Soft lighting. A desk. A bed. And sitting on the edge, eyes vacant, was Josh. He looked up as she stepped inside. And for a moment, just a flicker, he smiled. Mom, he said. But then his expression twisted, his voice warping into something deeper. No, you're not her. Not in this version. Lisa stepped back in horror as Josh's form glitched, his face flickering between child and teenager, between expressions she'd never seen before. Like he wasn't just one person anymore. And from behind her, Emily's voice echoed coldly. He's the sum of every loop. And now you are too. The door slammed shut. And the lights went out. The darkness inside the chamber wasn't empty, it breathed. Not like a place without light, but like a living, watching presence. Lisa stood frozen as the door locked behind her, the sound sharp, final, echoing in her chest like a death knell. Her son, if that's what he still was, sat just feet away, his face caught in a loop of shifting expressions. Innocence. Confusion. Cold intelligence. Terrified child. Detached observer. It was like watching every version of him she'd ever known, and dozens she hadn't, cycling across his skin like masks. His eyes met hers, calm, too calm, and she could see it now. He was aware. Entirely aware. Not of just this moment, but all of them. All the versions. All the loops. Lisa stepped forward carefully, not knowing whether she was walking toward her son or a stranger built from what was left of him. Her voice cracked as she spoke. Josh. Can you hear me? He smiled again, this time not a flicker, but something full and haunting. This isn't the first time you've asked me that. Her heart sank. Then tell me what this is. What happened to us? What they did. They didn't do anything, Mom, he said slowly, his voice layered with tones that didn't match his age. You did. You made the first choice. You agreed to the trial. You signed away your identity. I wasn't even born then, not really. I was designed to reflect you. To see what a replicated human bond could withstand. But you always ruined it. You always remembered. Lisa shook her head, overwhelmed, aching. I didn't ruin anything. I loved you. I still love you. I know, he said, the mask slipping just enough to show genuine sorrow. And that's the variable they can't control. That's why they keep running the program. Because somehow, you always break it. You choose pain. You choose love. You choose truth. Every time. She stepped closer. Then help me stop it. Help me shut it all down. He lowered his head, like a puppet on strings fraying at the ends. I can't. I'm not one person anymore. I'm all of them. The versions where I died. The ones where I turned on you. The ones where you let me go. It's all here, stacked and screaming and begging to be reset. Lisa knelt down in front of him, trembling. Then what happens if we don't reset? What happens if we let it all collapse? His eyes met hers, and for the first time, they were just his. Just Josh. The boy she raised. The son she remembered. Then they lose control. Behind them, the hum of the facility deepened into a groan, metal shifting, systems failing. The lights in the corridor outside flickered and died. Lisa stood as the ground vibrated beneath her feet. And then, the voice returned, not Josh's, but the one from the video, the one behind the curtain. Subject 17 compromised. Limiter non-compliant. Protocol failure confirmed. Initiate final containment. The chamber lit up in red. Sirens echoed. And the far wall slid open, revealing a control hub, banks of monitors displaying loops of Lisa and Josh in alternate versions of their lives. One showed them fleeing together across a frozen wasteland. Another showed Lisa standing over his empty crib, screaming. A third showed them walking into the woods side by side, hand in hand, only to vanish into mist. Lisa ran toward the monitors, tearing at wires, smashing glass with her flashlight. Sparks flew. The images glitched and froze. Josh stood behind her, breathing hard, struggling with something inside himself. If we shut this down, he said, we may not exist when it ends. She looked back at him, tears hot on her cheeks. Then let's stop living lives that were never ours. Suddenly, Emily's voice boomed through the chamber, no longer pretending to be her sister, flat, cold, automated. Lisa. You are at your final threshold. If you proceed, your memory imprint will dissolve. This version of you will be erased. Your emotional sequences will not survive reassembly. Lisa didn't hesitate. She screamed, do it anyway. With one last swing, she cracked the core processor. Everything went black. Silence fell. When she opened her eyes again, she was standing in her kitchen. Sunlight poured in through the window. The coffee was brewing. Greg hummed from the living room. The smell of pancakes drifted in from the stove. For a moment, she was breathless. It was perfect. Too perfect. Josh walked in wearing his backpack. Hey, Mom. I'm gonna be late. She stared at him. His voice. His face. Everything was normal. But something deep in her bones screamed. He kissed her on the cheek. Love you. She caught his arm. Josh, what's today's date? He blinked. It's Monday. October 17th. Same date as the first time the dreams started. Same exact loop. Her hands started to shake. Josh smiled. Mom, are you okay? She stared into his eyes and whispered, how many times have we done this? His expression changed. Slightly. Just enough. And then, he whispered back. Too many to count. The toaster popped. The lights flickered once. And somewhere, just out of sight, a tunnel waited beneath the surface of their perfect life. Waiting for them to wake up again. Let me know when you're ready for the final epilogue, or if you want to start scripting this for your YouTube video. For a long time, Lisa didn't speak about what happened, not to Greg, not to Josh, not to anyone. She didn't know how. Because even though the world around her had stitched itself into something resembling normal again, she could feel the seams. They were subtle at first, small irregularities, like conversations repeating themselves days later, or the radio skipping to a station that hadn't been available before. There were times she'd wake up with dried leaves in her hair, dirt on her hands, but no memory of going outside. And then there was Josh. He was himself, kind, curious, bright, but sometimes, when he thought she wasn't looking, he'd stop mid-sentence and stare off, like he was listening to a voice only he could hear. She began to write things down, trying to keep track of the patterns. The dates. The overlaps. She started to wonder if she had ever truly left the facility, or if this life, the one she fought so hard to return to, was just another simulation dressed up in better lighting. But she couldn't bring herself to test it. Not again. Not after what it cost. The questions that once screamed in her head had dulled into whispers. What was Project Echo's true purpose? Who were the people behind it? Were they scientists, puppeteers, or something worse, something non-human trying to understand the human condition through endless replication? What happened to all the other versions of herself she'd glimpsed in that final chamber? Had they been erased? Merged? Or were they still looping, reliving fragments of lives never meant to be whole? And most terrifying of all, was she the only one who had ever broken through? Or were there others out there, walking around with fractured memories and dreams of tunnels they couldn't explain, slowly piecing together the truth? Months passed, and Lisa found herself changing in quiet ways. She no longer craved certainty. She didn't try to force explanations. Instead, she focused on grounding herself in the realness of moments. Cooking breakfast with Greg. Listening to Josh talk about his dreams, most of them harmless now, filled with clouds and forests and music that seemed to float from nowhere. She planted a garden in the backyard, dug her hands into the earth, feeling the cool soil, half waiting to find concrete beneath it. But she never did. Just roots, worms, and rocks. And yet, she kept digging. Eventually, she returned to the woods where the hatch had first opened. It wasn't there anymore. Just leaves, branches, and silence. She stood in the clearing for a long time, listening to the wind move through the trees, wondering if someone or something was still watching. Wondering if she'd been left behind or set free. The sun broke through the canopy, scattering light across her face, and she realized something she hadn't before. Maybe the point wasn't to escape the loop. Maybe it was to survive it. To hold on to the pieces that mattered, even if the edges were blurred. Even if the timeline didn't make sense. Because love, no matter how it was coded or how many times it was rewritten, still left a mark. That night, she found a new envelope in the mailbox. No name. No return address. Inside was a photo, her and Josh, walking side by side, heads down, taken from a distance she couldn't place. And on the back, scribbled in the same red marker as before, just 3 words. You remembered again. She didn't cry. She didn't panic. She simply placed the photo in a drawer, turned out the lights, and went to bed. And for the first time in what felt like years, she dreamed of nothing. And somewhere, beyond the reach of any surveillance feed or laboratory record, a new loop began, one not built by machines or researchers or algorithms, but by choice. Lisa's choice. To live. To remember. To keep moving forward, even when the past refused to stay buried. The next morning, she woke up to birdsong, sunlight, and the scent of pancakes. And for now, that was enough. If this story made you feel something, if it made you question what's real, what's imagined, and what's worth holding on to, then it's already done what it was meant to do. Don't forget to drop a like, subscribe, and turn on notifications, because what's coming next might just change the way you see everything. Especially your dreams.